Today we'll be discussing Unit 4, Part 6, John Adams' Presidency. This is the second President of the United States who was elected in a two-party election for the first time, and we'll discuss how his presidency compared to Washington's by taking a look at the events that occurred throughout his presidency. The election of 1796 was the first two-party election. Republican Thomas Jefferson, who was part of Washington's cabinet, and Federalist John Adams faced off in the first ever two-party election. Adams won, and Jefferson ended up being the vice president. At this point in time, the president didn't select a vice president to run with him. It was whoever won second place would be vice president. So Adams and Jefferson, even though they had two completely different political views, were forced to work together. And this caused tensions within the Capitol itself because they couldn't make decisions together because they had two totally different points of view on the Constitution and how to rule this country. Some of the problems that the United States faced mainly had to deal with foreign relations. The French were angered with U.S. neutrality because they helped during the Revolutionary War, and they felt like the John Jay Treaty was a betrayal because they made negotiations with the British, and the French were at war with the British. So they felt like they were kind of shut out of a deal. As a result, we have something called the XYZ affair, where Adams sent 3 people to France to try to work things out, and the French demanded that the U.S. pay a bribe of $250,000. Whenever the word bribe is used in a presidency, it's going to cause some questionable thoughts of U.S. citizens. The public was very angered by the fact that the French were demanding a bribe that we did refuse to pay, and they demanded to declare war on the French. Although there was never actually a declared war on the French and Adams was able to steer clear of that, we did increase the size of our army and build a navy out of protection, which ended up being good for us in the end because the larger the navy and military, the stronger that we appear to outside nations. We did have an undeclared naval war with the French, but never an actual war, so we did suffer somewhat with our shipping. But we were able to steer clear of an actual war. Due to the split between Federalists and Republicans, we have what's called the development of Alien and Sedition Acts. The Federalists aimed to destroy political opponents by passing laws aimed at immigrants. A lot of the people that supported the Republican side were immigrants to the country and trying to become citizens. So they passed strict immigration laws, and then they also passed laws that limited what people could say about the government, which would actually come in conflict with the Constitution. So war fever, or the desire to go to war with France, split the Federalists and the Republicans even more than before. The Federalists wanted to go to war, and the Republicans thought it would be better to follow Washington's rule and just stay out of it. So they passed these laws, and the ones aimed at immigrants said that instead of 5 years to become a citizen, it now had to be 14. And that is what it is now, but think about the time when almost everybody in this country was an immigrant. We had a birth of a new nation and all this new land and the hopes of all these new freedoms. So people were coming here left and right, and we didn't have that much of a population to begin with. So this affects a lot of people. Also, the president could deport or imprison immigrants that were considered dangerous. So that's not saying a lot. What does danger really mean? And that's left up to the president, which is another power that he has that could kind of offset that checks and balances system that the Constitution put into place. The other part of this were the Sedition Acts. Sedition means that you are saying something that you should not be saying about your country, and it made it a crime to write or say anything insulting or false about the government. Now, people argue that this limited free speech because that was the whole point, that you should be able to say, our government is not doing what they should be doing, like what they wanted to do during the time of the Acts with the British. So this ended up going to court and trying to be declared unconstitutional, but because we didn't have ruling, or the Supreme Court cannot rule something unconstitutional at this time, it actually went to the states, which became a states' rights issue. So, Republicans tried to strike down the Alien Sedition Act, saying that it violates the Constitution. Remember that Republicans interpret the Constitution very strictly, so they saw violations of the Constitution easily by looking at the First Amendment. As a result of this, they took it to the states because they couldn't pass it at a Supreme Court level, declaring it unconstitutional. So they went state by state, and more states agreed that it was unconstitutional. As a result, the Alien and Sedition Acts expire in 1801, or they stop in their existence. As a result of this process, though, we see a strengthening in the states' rights, which is also something that the Republicans liked. They were able to pass saying that certain laws were unconstitutional at a state level. So it actually gave power to the states to check up on the national government, because it said that states could nullify laws passed by Congress. If that state thought the law wasn't good, then it wouldn't exist in that state. That's something that not necessarily happens today, but at a point in time where the Supreme Court was unable to declare something unconstitutional, or that it violates the Constitution itself, the states could opt out of that law. Now, Adams' presidency seems to be filled with a lot of controversy and tension. Due to the emerging of political parties, within the White House we have a lot of tension, which caused all of these things to happen. So when we compare him to Washington, we look at a fairly neutral president who wanted the betterment of everybody, compared to someone who was kind of pulled in each and every direction and didn't have a fair chance at making the best decisions possible. So it's interesting to think about, are political parties actually hurting our country, and why did they stick around today? What do you think? Do you think that political parties make our country a better country and help them make better decisions, or do they limit the ability to come to compromise?